Welcome to the Cool Stuff channel with Jimmy. Please like and subscribe if you want me to keep taking my precious time to make these videos.
The SEMA 2020.
Like Heaterbox.
All right, Lamar, Gigolo.
I hang up.
Too late.
For those of you that want to test an old school fuel gauge in an old cluster, you can do, I pulled this out, and these studs, these posts go to the PC board, as you might call it, printed circuit board, although this is so old that I don't even know if you could call it that. But so anyway, the fuel gauge works off power and ground and resistance. So as you can see, this is basically the ground path right here to this post. So if the gauge is mounted in there like that, actually it's mounted like that. So this would be your flow of your ground right here. And then this would be your 12 volt power going through the gauge voltage regulator, which steps power down from 12 volts to something more reasonable. Anyway, I got a neat little thing I use to clean fuel injectors, and it's just a 9-volt battery with a little on-off switch here. Just a little press button trigger switch. So I'll hit it, and yeah, the gauge still works. So just an easy way you can use 9-volt on this application anyway to make it work. But you'll notice that that's a problem. That's a problem. So yeah, it's probably replaced the boards at this point, but we'll see. All right, guys, so the sender in the car checked in at 77.9 ohms, and there is fuel in the car. So I believe that's a GM sender. So hunted around, obviously I just showed you that this works with the Mopar gauges, obviously a Mopar sender. So here I am at empty, and I'm basically showing 75 ohms. And as I raise the sender, I'm going down in resistance. So I get to the very top to the stop, and I end at 8.5 ohms, 8.45. So as I mentioned, the one that's in the car, I've got about 3/4 of a tank of gas right now, and it's registering 77.9. So it's working completely different than this one. So I believe that if I swap out this sender with the one that's in there and put my gauges back in with my new boards and everything, we should be off to the races, unless there's some type of wire that's got a problem. But for those of you that have experienced problems with your gauges, one of the first things you want to check are these boards, because these pins fall apart, and almost all of them are loose. The other board is somewhere around here. It's right here. Here's the other one, Stocker. And yeah, this one is in a lot better shape, but still, that pin's loose, that pin's loose. So I've been told that these can be the problem. I've been told the voltage limiter can be the problem. So it's not a cheap date. You're talking for these here, $300-400 situation. But if you want your gauges to work, these are the steps you got to go through to make it happen. So again, just a quick rundown of the back of the gauges. You've got two circuit boards. You've got a voltage limiter. You've got what looks to be a condenser that plugs into one of the voltage limiter terminals, the one in the middle. And then your voltage gauge actually does not feed off the board at all. It has kind of like a jam nut thing with a star washer in there where you hook your voltage wires up to that during the install of the cluster. And then over here, your temperature gauge and your fuel gauge do actually get feeds, electrical feeds from the board, which the voltage limiter is involved with that. So there you go. That's the overview of the gauge cluster, and hopefully we'll be back in business there. All right, guys, so we're into the rebuild on the 66 Belvedere cluster. Ordered these PC boards from Classic Industries. I don't even know if you can call them PC boards. I just call them circuit boards. But yeah, they're actually pretty nice. And you'll see that I got a little bench test set up. So I got my motorcycle trickle charger, 12 volt. I replaced the voltage limiter. And what I've done is I have sent power to the board, and I've done a ground to the device to create a circuit ground for the whole circuit. And then, as you can see, I took a ground from the white wire, which is your fuel sender pin, went over to the fuel sender terminal, and then grounded the fuel sender to the gauge cluster. And we're just doing a little bench test here just to make sure. And I already showed you that the gauge worked with a 9-volt battery. So now we'll show you that as I lift the float, you're going to see the gauge move, hopefully. And there is like a delay, which is kind of good, because if your fuel's sloshing around in the tank, then you're not going to have your needle, bouncing all over the place. But yeah, you can see it moving and functioning and working right. And if I lift it way up, I'm basically all the way to full. I'm hitting the stopper right there. So the needle's kind of catching up with us, but you guys get the drift. So, yeah, the sender in the car, I was told, was the correct sender. I ohmed it out, and no, it's not. So I'll give you an ohm shot of the sender here in a second. All right, guys, so I pulled the sender out of the tank, and you'll see that problem number one is pretty obvious. Set the phone down here. The float is stuck. It's not moving. Why? Because it's caught on this tab. So that's problem one. So if I lift it above the tab, now it can move, right? But let's check the ohms, all right? So hang on, and I'll be back with you. All right, so this one goes from 79 ohms on empty up to 9 ohms full. So basically what I discovered is that the fuel sender was installed upside down by the past person, and as a result of that, the float stuck. And when the float stuck, it went past the stop on the sender, which caused the sender to output an ohm reading that was not within the scale on a normal Mopar sender. That's what was tricking me on this. So looks like the correct Mopar sender was in the car, but it had went past the stop limit and was displaying an ohm rating that was not on the scale of what you typically see. So you'll see here that this is a helpful chart to show you what the different ohm levels are of the fuel senders for the various domestic classic cars. Hopefully this is helpful for you guys.